the comments, telling the comments, you have sheets here. Close. Then the miracles are still coming in Eretz Yisrael. There were 4 places that the missiles fell, and every place it fell in such a way that unfortunately there were injuries, but not one single person killed, and that's miraculous. In one place there were 4 huge buildings, and there were almost 90, 100 people that were injured, but very few seriously. And the miracle was that there were 4 buildings, but the missile fell in the space between all 4 buildings. And the main impact of the missile was in the earth, all the damage that was done was just from the blast, not that the missile actually impacted and knocked down the building itself. Has shown that would have happened, it would have been much worse. And one of my children has a friend who lives in Yerushalayim, and he told me that there was a missile that fell in Yerushalayim, in a certain spot, and what happened was that that spot, the authorities closed off. No one was allowed to be there from 4 to 7, I think. What happened was early in the morning, the Arabs were rioting over there for some reason or other. So they didn't allow anyone to go to that area. And the missile fell exactly in that spot which nobody was allowed to be there. These are all miracles, miracles, miracles. But we still need the ultimate miracle. Okay, getting to the next page here, which is page 40. Last thing we did was talk about matzah. And that matzah is food of faith. Nichod munasa, it gives us faith, emunah. But there's this one thing which I still need to bring out, I did not, and that is, some years we actually learned the Maimer from the Tzemach Tzedek inside. It's in the curriculum of last year and next year. And that is what Tzemach Tzedek explains, even though we say matzah is food of emunah, and it gives them emunah, but it doesn't mean emunah in general that Hashem exists. For that, you don't need matzah. Anybody who has an ounce of brains has to recognize that Hashem created the world, that the world did not come out by itself. Even though all these brilliant people believe in a theory that everything happened by itself, but the truth is, it doesn't make any sense. And I know you can argue with these people, all day long, and a lot of them are philosophers and scientists and thinkers, and to them it doesn't make sense that someone created the world. But the idea that good morning, good afternoon, that everything that we have in this world and all the brilliance in it just happened to form by itself is absolutely insane. Doesn't make any sense. So if it doesn't make any sense, why there's so many brilliant people that believe it? And the answer is because it's more convenient to believe it, not because it really makes sense. I just want to give you an example. This father once asked me to talk to his daughter because she wanted to marry out and wanted me to talk to her. I never met her before. Anyway, she didn't want to. At the end, she agreed and sat down to talk. And she told me before we start that listen, I don't believe in anything. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in religion. I don't believe in spirituality. So really, I think this is a waste of time, but my father wants me to talk, so. So I asked her a question, which is based on a story with the Ramban. And I said, if you would have an apartment, no one else has a key to your apartment, and you leave just the hypothetical question, you leave a blank piece of paper on your table, and next to it is a bottle of ink, and you go to work. You come home from work. There's a little poem written on the piece of paper. Now, nothing was broken in, no windows, no doors, no one has to keep your apartment, and there's a poem written on the piece of paper. What would you assume, that somebody somehow did get in and wrote the poem? Or would you think maybe it's a possibility that a truck was driving by and the bottle of ink was shaking from the vibration and the ink spilled out and it formed a letter, and then another letter, and another letter that altogether became a word. Then there was a space, and there was another word, and then another space, and there was a whole sentence. And then the first word on the second sentence followed the last word on the first sentence. And the second line turned out to be a poem. And then the third line, and the fourth line, and the fifth line, the 10th line, all 10 lines, there's a sequence, and it fits in, and it's beautiful. It's all from the vibrations of the truck. She had no idea where I was going with it. She got a little hysterical. She was banging on the table. It's absolutely insane. That's stupid. No person would believe such a thing. I don't know what you thought I wanted to bring out, but that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Okay, so it doesn't make any sense. Good. I said to her, what if you give me a different scenario? You come home from work and there's not a poem on the piece of paper, but a blotch of ink on the piece of paper. Could that be vibration of a truck? Said, yeah, that's a possibility. And so what's the difference? And her answer was very simple. A blotch of ink could be that the truck was shaking, the house shook, and the ink shook, and the ink spilled out. But to say that there's a sequence, that this letter and that letter and the next letter happened to form a word, and then there happened to be a space, and there happened to be another word, and there happened to be another space, and happened to be another word, and the first word on the second line follows the last word on the first line, and again a space and a word and a space. That's insane. So then I asked, where do you think there's more sequence and order, in this poem of 10 lines, or in the universe? In the human body, in one cell, in the DNA. You can't even compare. It's infinitely more in the human body and in the cell and in DNA than on this piece of paper. So with a piece of paper, you think it's insane, not willing to accept a theory that it happened by chance. But everything else, she didn't have an answer, of course. But what is the answer? The answer is, subconsciously, if I accept that Hashem created the world, whatever you'll call him, but there's a creator who created the universe, you must accept logically that this creator is infinitely more brilliant than anything we can imagine. And therefore, you must accept logically that he created the world for a purpose, which automatically means that I have a purpose. And if I have a purpose, it means I have a responsibility. That means I'm not just free to live my life as I wish. I have a certain responsibility to do in this world. And subconsciously, it's a psychological sort of defense mechanism. I don't accept that there's a God that created the world, because then I'll be in trouble. I think that's the only way to explain it. Because logically, there's probably nothing in Torah that's more logical than the belief that there is a creator to the universe. So what is the matzah all about? So Matzah explains, when we say that matzah gives a moon, it's not just about the idea that Hashem created the world. It's about the idea that we learn in Chassidus that the world is bottled to Hashem. The whole day of bitla yesh. That the world needs Hashem's existence every second, and without that it wouldn't exist, and therefore the world doesn't have its own existence, and the world and Hashem are absolutely one. That's the idea. In other words, according to Chassidus, Emun in Hashem, it's not just that Hashem exists. Emun Hashem, there's two things. One is Emun in the existence of Hashem, and the other is called the Emun in oneness of Hashem. These are two separate mitzvahs. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, is not declaring that Hashem exists. We're saying Hashem is one. So what does that mean? That Hashem and the world is one, that the world is not a separate entity of Hashem. The world is bottled to Hashem. It's an extension of Hashem. doesn't have its own independent existence. That is something which, to have that amunah, we need the matzah. But the general amunah that the world exists, that's something which is just logical, and you don't need the matzah for that. That's one thing I wanted to add. Another thing I wanted to add was that we said last week that matzah is all about bittul. Explains another thing about matzah. Every meal that we sit down to eat bread, there's supposed to be salt on the table, and we're supposed to dip the bread or the matzah in the salt. Some people have a custom, they pour the salt on the bread, but there's no question that there has to be salt. And actually, it's based on a pasuk in last week's parsha that every carbon needs salt. And being that the table is like the base, like the mizbeach, and the food that I eat is like a carbon, so therefore we also put salt on the table. And if you learn the parsha, you're probably aware that this is based on the fact that when Hashem created the world, He separated the water from above and the water from below, and the water that went down here had a complaint. Hashem, why are you distancing us? Why are they meriting to be near you and we're so far from you? So Hashem said, therefore, salt which comes from water will be used on the mizbeach every time. However, the halacha is when you eat matzah, I'm talking about the kildayis matzah, the first bite of matzah that we eat in order to do the mitzvah, it's supposed to be without salt. What's the reason? Yeah. Only when you wash. I don't think other foods have to have salt. No. Not that I know. You're saying maybe it just has to be sitting on the table. Maybe. Okay. Let's look into that. So the simple reason for this is so we should enjoy the taste of the matzah without any other taste. The matzah is the mitzvah. So if you have salt, it takes away a little bit from the taste of the matzah. Now you're tasting the salt. So that's the reason why we don't have salt when we eat the matzah. The reason, according to Chassidus, which is not Chas v'Sholom, Chassidus is never a contradiction, it's just a deeper layer of understanding, is being that matzah is emunah. Emunah is faith, which is higher than intellect. Salt is all about, actually, the salt gives a taste to the food. Salt is a spice that gives taste to food. The word for taste in Hebrew is tam. So tes, ayin, mem. The word for reason in Hebrew is also the same letters, tes, ayin, mem. What is the implication? That when you do things that are doing this out of amunah, I don't understand the reason, it's beyond understanding, it's inconceivable, but just Hashem said so, so I'm doing it. So I'm doing it without reason. Also, I doesn't have a time, it doesn't have a taste, because I don't understand it. When you do something to understand and you can appreciate the depth, the reason that's behind it, it's a different kind of an enjoyment. So basically, salt, which gives the tam, represents also tam, meaning reason. Being that matzah is amunah, which is beyond reason, therefore we eat the matzah without salt. And last week's Likuti Torah is a maimah, one of the longest maimarim there, 7 or 8, I don't know, chapters, all about salt, what is salt, filthiness. Okay, now we're going to page 40. So after we finish with the matzah, now let's talk about the chametz. So we know that the mitzvah in the positive is eating matzah, and the leisesa, the negative commandment, is not to eat chametz during Pesach. However, what we need to understand is why is it that this isur, this prohibition, is something which is so different than any other prohibition that we know in Torah, on many levels, and I'll go through the list. Number one, looking now at page 40. Isur b'mashahu. Isur b'mashahu means that, generally speaking, even things that you're not allowed to eat, there's a shear. It has a certain measurement. That if it has this measurement, then you're not allowed to eat it. And if it doesn't have the measurement, it's not an isur, because it has no importance, it has no significance if it's very small. What is the measurement? Different foods have different measurements. And there's different measurements for different food and different halachas. There's a measurement for things that you carry on Shabbos, that if it's smaller than a certain size, it has no significance. There are measurements when it comes to eating certain foods that are not kosher. If it's smaller than a certain amount, it has no significance. And there's also a difference. There's a one measurement for Yom Kippur, different measurement for different things. When it comes to chametz, there is no measurement. Isurei b'mashu means even a small, tiny piece is asur. And what it means is, in addition to that, in halacha, there's a concept of bittul, which means if I have something which is treif, but it falls into something else which is kosher, so does the treif get canceled out and it's permissible to eat it anyway? It depends. No one's going to make any halachic ruling based on what I'm saying now, because everything has so many conditions. But it depends. There's some things which are batul b'roy, which means if there's more of the good than the bad gets canceled by the good. Some things has to be bittul b'shishim. If there's 60 times more of the good than the bad gets canceled out. Some things 100. If there's 100 times of the kosher more than the non-kosher in certain averos, then the non-kosher gets canceled out, and something is 200. When it comes to chametz, these are the words in halacha, number 14, afilu be'elef loy batul. Even if the non-kosher is one little drop and the kosher is 1,000 times more, it's still not batul, which means it still maintains its isur and it makes everything straight. So the question is, why is chametz so severe? Another thing is, other treif foods, even though I'm not allowed to eat it, I can have it in my house. Chametz during Pesach, you're not allowed to have it in your house. There's a pasuk in the Chumash where we have the pasuk over here, page 41, where it says, "Lo yirah lecha chametz." Chametz should not be seen in your possession. And no leaven to be seen in your possession. And then there's another passage where it says, chametz shouldn't be seen and chametz shouldn't be found. Which means even if it's not seen, if it's hidden, but if it's in your possession, you're not allowed to have it. Not only that, even if you don't have it in your house, someone else is holding it for you in their house, that's also chametz the Pesach. You're not allowed to have. We don't find this with other food that are not kosher. So why that by chametz more than anything else? Then we have the halacha of bedikas chametz, which means you have to search for the chametz. Again, nothing else has such a halacha that you have to take a candle and a wooden spoon, and you go out on an all-out search. What are you looking for? You're looking for crumbs, Shabbat crumbs, that maybe in the cracks and the crevices, you can find something there. You don't find it by other things, only by chametz. Going down the list, that's number 3. Where it's number 3, bedikas chametz b'churim or b'zdokim. That's the halacha. I think I put in a page of the Shulchan Aruch. If you look at page 43, it starts off with the laws of searching for chametz. First of all, you have to search with a candle. And then where I underlined it says you have to search in the hidden places, in little holes and little cracks. You don't find there's anything else. But of course, other things you're allowed to have in the house. They could be sitting on a shelf. Chametz, not only it can't be in the house, you have to search before Pesach. Maybe there's a little bit of chametz somewhere in a crack. Number 4, asur b'hana. Other averos, you're not allowed to eat certain food that are kosher, but you can benefit from it. Let's say you can sell it to someone and you can have the money. Chametz, not only you're not allowed to eat, you're also not allowed to have any benefit from chametz. What happens if you do find chametz on Pesach? So you have to get rid of it. Of course, we get rid of the chametz before Pesach, but also if you find chametz on Pesach, how do you get rid of chametz? So in Gemara, there are different opinions. One opinion says, anyway, you can take it and grind it. Some say you can take it and just break it up and throw it to the wind. The wind gets carried away, you can throw it into the water. And then Rabbi Yehuda says, Ain, you see it here, number 5, Ain bir chametz ela b'sreita. The only way to get rid of chametz is by burning it. All the other ways, not really getting rid of it. You're taking it apart. So this big piece of bread becomes crumbs, little crumbs. You put it in the water, it falls apart. You throw it to the wind, it falls apart. But when you burn it, you're actually destroying it. So therefore, this chametz is such a severe enemy that not only you have to get rid of it, but you have to get rid of it only through burning it. You have to make a fire and burn it to be totally destroyed. Never. What did this poor guy do? And then there's even a bigger question. Oh, wait a second. What about matzah shruya? Chassidim are careful that you don't eat gebrot. What is gebrot? It's one of the furthest, far-fetched concern that could possibly be. And that is that maybe the matzah didn't bake 100%. So there's some dough still in the matzah. And now the matzah got wet because I put it into the soup. And that dough that's still somehow there makes contact with the water and becomes chametz. Very far-fetched. And that's why so many Jews who are 100%, 1,000% observant Torah Jews aren't careful with this because it's a very far-fetched concern. Especially in the way the custom is in Chabad, how careful we are to make sure we cover the wine, we cover the matzah, make sure that the matzah is not exposed at all. Not even that, men, after they finish eating, before they bench, do mayim achreinim. What's mayim achreinim? You wash the tip of your finger. You ever watch how men do it? The tip of your finger, you wash, and then you move it over your lips. Pesach, we don't do that. Because there might be crumbs of matzah on my lips. Then I'm going to move it over. Imagine, I'm not taking, it's not a lake, it's a little bit of dampness on my finger. And how much matzah do I have on my lip? And maybe in that drop of matzah that's on my lip, in my contact with the water, it's like so far-fetched. Like, where do we have this with anything else? And then we have matzah shmura. What does matzah shmura mean? All matzah has to be washed, that it doesn't become chametz. But matzah shmura means not only that you wash it after you have dough, after you have the flour and the water make contact as dough, now you have to make sure that it gets baked before 18 minutes. Matzah shmura means that as soon as you cut it off, as soon as you take it off the field, it's only stalks of wheat. There's no dough here yet. Even that shouldn't get wet. It's also like so far-fetched. Then the big question is like this: after everything that's said and done, it shows us how matzah is like chametz is such something. So obviously, every trade food, whether it's luchak inflation, whether it's a trade animal, or whether it's a kosher animal that wasn't chefed properly, or it's something which, or another reason why it's trade, it's klipa. It's something which has impurity to it. But this is something so klipadik and so impure that we go all the way out to get rid of it and have nothing to do with it, not to see it, right? All these things. But then you find something which is the exact opposite. All the other things that are not kosher are not kosher all year round. Chametz, which we just finished saying that it must be the worst kind of impurity you can imagine, all year long it's perfectly kosher. Nothing wrong. Only 8 days. If it's so severe, why only 8 days? Not only that it's permissible to eat after Pesach, there are times after Pesach where it's actually a mitzvah to eat chametz. I can't say that this is Shabbos, because Shabbos we eat challah, but it's not a mitzvah. If you decide to eat matzah on Shabbos, it's fine. But there's a place in Torah where there's a mitzvah, it must be chometz. Where's that? What? By Shavuos, right. You turn the page 44, where it says you should bring bread together with this carbon on Shavuos, and then it says you shall bake it leavened as first fruit offering to Hashem. That's the leaven. We just had Pesach 6 weeks, 7 weeks ago. Now we're having Shavuos. Pesach, we were like, in an insane way, staying away from the chametz. And on Shavuos, it's a mitzvah, only chametz. How does that make sense? Okay. So the general answer to all this is plain Chassidus, and not only Chassidus, really it's explained in Gemara. The general idea is that of course the Gemara says chametz represents the Yetzer Hara, but specifically what? The Yetzer Hara has a lot of different aspects to it. Specifically, it's all about arrogance. And the basis is because the Gashmi is the difference between chametz and matzah is really very, very specific, because the ingredients for chametz and the ingredients for matzah are the same. Chametz is flour and water, matzah is flour and water. Both are baked, put into an oven. So what is the difference? Only one difference. That in the case of chametz, the dough rises. In the case of matzah, the dough doesn't rise. So the rising aspect, that's what defines chametz. So rising in Aveda represents arrogance. That arrogance is something which is negative. And in the book that I put in, but usually it always works out the same way, that is so, maybe there's no little time left, and I think I actually took it out. We used to have the Gemara, few pages of Gemara all about arrogance, how horrible it is, how terrible it is, how devastating it is, and what it does for us spiritually. But the Gemara talks about arrogance. Chassidus talks about yeshus. I mean, the difference is arrogance means gaiva, showing off, boasting, being very proud of myself, looking down on other people, because that's arrogance. Yeshus is much more refined than that. Yeshus means what we just spoke about, the feeling of separateness from Hashem. Yesh means I don't feel the bittul, how I and Hashem are absolutely one. And there are naturally infinite levels of this, but that's generally speaking, what Yeshus is all about. And number 13, it's just interesting to notice that even in writing, the word chametz and the word matzah are identical. They both have a mem. They both have a tzaddik. The only difference is one letter. I'm looking at on number 13 on the list. That chametz is spelled with a ches and matzah is spelled with a hey. And even these two letters are very similar. Very easy to confuse them. The difference between the ches and the hey is just a little opening in one side. Other than that, they're pretty much all similar. So generally speaking, this is based on something which we learned about already in the Maimer of Lech Lecha. We learned about it when we spoke about Amalek, and that is that Yeshus is not only a negative character trait, but Yeshus is considered the source of all other negative character traits that exist. If you remember the Maimer that we learned in the Lech Lecha, it talks about how a person who has Yeshus is selfish. And a person who's selfish is going to be a person who doesn't know how to give, not tzedakah, not bikkur cholim, and not all the other things that the Torah talks about, where we should be giving and generous and reaching out and caring and going out of our way for another person. Everything that's included in that is based on bittul. A person who has bittul can reach out to another person, can feel another person saying, will go out of their way for another person. Person has bittul won't have jealousy. All the character traits that are basic negative character traits, and they cause all the problems that we have, is all based on yeshus. Like one example is a basic character trait, which is considered not only negative, but a source of many other things, is a person who is in denial of their faults. Person who does not, the inability to recognize that I have something wrong. No matter what people will say to me, I'll tell them, no, it's not my fault, that's not what I did, that's not what I mean, I didn't do anything wrong. And a person like that could never really change. What is it based on? Why does the person have a difficulty in accepting that there's anything wrong with me? Because of yeshus. Person that's bittul could recognize that there's something wrong with me and I have to correct it. And if you go through the whole list, everything that's brought down in Torah as a negative character trait, we went through this, I think, in Lech Lecha, in Purim, is all based on yeshus. In terms of my relation with Hashem, it's also the same thing. What gets in the way of a person connecting to Hashem properly and accepting Hashem completely, the way I'm supposed to accept Hashem, is yeshus. But the person's a yesh is going to be lacking in amunah, be lacking in their devotion to Hashem, and so on. But being that yeshus is the source of all evil, everything that goes wrong is based on yeshus, which means our relationship with Hashem is based on yeshus. If it's not, that then I'm not allow it to be the way it should be. And my relationship with other people is based on yeshus. That if I have bittul, then my relationship with other people will be the way the Torah wants it to be. If I'm a yesh, then my relationship with other people would not be the way the Torah wants it to be. So bittul and yeshus is really the source of everything and anything, positive or negative. And that's why matzah is bittul. Matzah is bittul because what do we say matzah is? Matzah is about amunah. And we explained that amunah is not amunah that Hashem exists. Amunah that I and Hashem are one. And that's what bittul is all about. So matzah is this bittul. And even begashmi is, matzah is something which is made without any ingredients, which means it represents simplicity. You know, when you bake the matzah and you're in the matzah bakers, you remember they're supposed to be kneading the dough all the time. Because if you don't knead, it rises. You have to constantly make sure the yeshin doesn't go up there. You take a thing with holes, you put holes in it, so it shouldn't rise. Basically, the avodah of matzah is bittul, and chometz is yeshus. So even though we learned before that amalek is yeshus, then we learned that that midyan is yeshus. I think it came up in one of the classes. Is basically in those areas we usually point to something like which is more of a manifestation of the yeshus. Like amalek is all about stout, coldness, and these are the things that we focus on. But it's based on yeshus. When it comes to midyan is all about arguing and fighting and lack of Ahavas Yisrael. It's based on yeshus. I think when it comes to Pesach and chometz, it's not anything that's a manifestation of yeshus. Here we're fighting yeshus itself, which means begashmi, that the more a person observes this mitzvah of eating matzah on Pesach and gets rid of the chometz, the more they'll be successful in having a year that'll be a bittul dik year. I just want to add one more thing. There's one other place in Torah where the prohibition is similar to chometz. Only one other thing. And what is that? Avodah zarah. Food that's related to avodah zarah, to idol worship, you're not allowed to eat, you're not allowed to have any benefit, you're not allowed to have it in your house, you have to get rid of it, you have to destroy it. Very similar, almost identical. Why? Because yeshus is a form of avodah zarah. Remember again, avodah zarah doesn't mean I deny that Hashem exists. Avodah zarah is denying that I and Hashem of the world is one. That is really the essence of avodah zarah. This is the way Alter Rebbe explains it in Tanya. That all the union of mitzvahs is all about becoming one with Hashem. When I do an Aveira, it's this idea of separating myself from Hashem's oneness. And that's what the Torah mitzvah are all about. It's either bittul or it's yeshus. You got the general idea? So the significance of the Hey Neches is that the Hey has hope. The Ches only has one direction that you can possibly go. Everything else is locked up. You're gonna go down. The Hey, you can go up. There's a little opening on top. What does it mean? A person who's a chametz person, if you say the person of Yeshua, that person never recognizes their faults. And if I never recognize my faults, I never know to correct it. And therefore, there's only one direction I'll be going down, never come to be true. Person has bittul, even if they're not in the right place, but they have this ability to recognize that it's something that needs to be corrected, something that needs to be repaired. And therefore, there's an opening indicating that there's a way out. But after everything I said, then the question is, so why is chametz permissible all year round? It should be usher a whole year. And even if you find a reason, there's another question. So why can't it should be the other way around? All year it should be usher. For 8 days, you can eat some bagel. Okay. Why is it the opposite? It's such a severe thing. It's only 8 days a year. So this is the way to explain this. And this is the thrust of it, even though there are some details to it. The thrust of it is there is a chametz that's a good chametz. And therefore, all year round, we're supposed to eat chametz. And there's a chametz that's a bad chametz. And that's why in Pesach we don't eat chametz. How could chametz be good? And the answer is that this is something which you've definitely come across in other sikhs. Now we just got to put it together. That on one hand, the person has to have bittul. On the other hand, we have to be strong. We have to feel proud that I am who I am, proud that I'm a Jew, proud that I'm connected to Hashem. And that sense of pride gives me the strength to live my life as a Jew. Because if a person doesn't have that sense of pride, they'll be crushed by the world around them. People making fun of what you're doing. Everyone's going in a different direction. Where are you going? What are you doing? No one does this. You look like you don't fit into the rest of the world. All these things, if a person doesn't have a real sense of pride and a feeling of self-esteem and the yid, they can't go through life. And the truth is self-esteem as a person, not only as a yid. It's known that today's day and age, there are plenty of people that are very talented, very capable, and unfortunately, they are not successful in life, not because they're not talented, and not because they're not capable, and not because they're not intelligent. It's simply because they have a lack of self-esteem, and they can't get up and do anything. Everything gets in their way, and everything stops them. Person has to be, to a certain extent, aggressive and strong and assertive and move forward, overcome challenges. And for that, you need to feel a certain sense of strength, self-importance, self-esteem in a positive way. That is the chametz that we're talking about that's positive. And that you need, in the language of Chassidus, you need bittul, but you also need to have a certain sense of metzius, that I'm something and I need to overcome, and I can overcome all the obstacles in my life to do the things that I need to accomplish. I'm sure you agree with that, but yes.
So then the reason that we don't partake in that little Passover, that's positive chametz, is because now Hashem is completely taking us out of completely surrender.
Okay, so need to explain if that's the case. So why is it that 8 days we don't eat chametz?
Yeah.
Because that's negative, that's arrogant, that's yeshus. And all year long, like I said, it should have been the other way around. That generally speaking, chametz is prohibited. Yeshus is wrong. But there's also room for feeling strong and assertive and aggressive and sense of self-worth and self-esteem, and that I need these things for life. So for 8 days, we should be allowed to eat chametz, not the way it is. So the answer to that is that bittul is something which is passive. Bittul means I am not. From being not, you can't accomplish anything. Right? I'm absent. From being absent, you can't get anywhere. The tools to accomplish is actually the opposite, is the sense of self-esteem and the strength and the aggressiveness and the assertiveness. The chametz, which is the positive chametz, those are my tools to build, to accomplish, to establish, to do things in life, begashmitz and beruchnis. But it has to be based on bittul. In other words, who are the people that get things done in the world? Most of them are very arrogant people, and they're not afraid of anything, and they stand up to people, and which, on one hand they're getting things accomplished. On the other hand, they also end up trampling on other people and bullying other people and pushing other people out of the way. And they make a lot of money, and they're not so honest. So that's why, because it's usually based all on yeshus. So on one hand, you have to have this strength to go forward, but the strength, if it's based on bittul, then it'll go in a positive direction. In a sense, it's like a building. You have a building, and in this building, you have all different kinds of offices and all different kinds of functions, but the building has to be standing on a strong foundation. The foundation itself is nothing, it's in the ground. But that foundation supports the whole building. And the stronger the foundation is, the stronger the whole building will be. Bittul is more of a foundation than tools for action. Because again, bittul is the opposite. Bittul is to be withdrawn. Bittul means I'm not. It's something passive. To accomplish things in the world, I need to go out of myself and be creative. To be creative, I have to have a certain sense of self-confidence, a sense of self-esteem, a sense of self-worth. And these are the tools with which I could accomplish things in the world. So therefore, let's look at a day of a person's day. We wake up in the morning and we say, I recognize that. The moment I wake up, Hashem, I know it's all from you. Thank you, Hashem, for giving me back my neshama. I start off with bittul. And then I take a siddur and I make brachas. Thank you, Hashem, for giving me vision. Thank you, Hashem, that I can stand straight. Thank you, Hashem, for this. Thank you, Hashem, for that. And then I take the siddur and I daven shachas. Hoyel Hashem, Kira Vishmai. I thank you, Hashem, for everything. Hashem, you created the world. I go through the whole davening, which means this is where I establish the bittul. Then what? You daven a whole day. What's going to happen? How many yeshivas are going to be built if I daven a whole day? How many shuls are they going to be if I daven a whole day? How many, all the activities that need to be done are going to be done if I'm just going to sit and daven a whole day? I have to take the talis off and go out and do something. That's the time. So what's supposed to be the ratio of the day? Most of the day is just bittul and then a little bit of doing something. Or most of the day is doing something, but the foundation has to be bittul. I think you know the answer. Generally speaking, we were created in this world to do, for action. Yes, yeah.
No, I just wondering if the word concept like that boy giving one of her was given, seem like you said that.
Yes, that is the same idea, right? That's the idea that on one hand it's a mountain, because we have to be like a mountain. On the other hand, it's the lowest mountain. It has to be the combination of both, the yeshus, which is a positive yeshus, and the same thing bittul at the same time. But what I'm saying is also that the ratio sort of the day is supposed to be, generally speaking, it says Adam Omo Yivolim, men were created to work the gashmis and work the ruchnis. So we have work to do, which are the mitzvahs, going to work, which is going to be people who have jobs to do, raising family is work, everything is working. And the tools that are necessary for working is not bittul, are the other tools, the feeling of self-confidence and self-worth and self-esteem. But there's all these feelings, all these tools have to be based on bittul. So therefore, bittul, in a sense, quantity-wise, it's like the smallest part of the day. That's how I started the day with Maidani and with davening. The rest of the day is action. Same thing with the year. The general year has to be action. So for 11 months a year, and most of the days of the 12th month, it's all about action. That's why we have chametz. But it has to be based on bittul. So Hashem gave us an 8-day seminar on bittul. 8 days that we exercise bittul to the core, down to the bone, every single day, no chametz, and bittul. Once we get that bittul into our kishkis, then starts the rest of the year where we need the chametz. But only because we have the bittul on Pesach, now the chametz that I'll have throughout the year will be going in the right direction. There's a beautiful sikha where the Rebbe explains the story in Chumash. There's one parsha of Chumash, which on the surface is so hard to understand without Chassidus, that Yaakov was spending a lot of time with sheep. Remember that parsha? The speckled sheep and the brown sheep and the striped sheep. We get these sheep and those sheep. Yaakov Avinu, Teferes Atzilus, he's busy with sheep. What's going on here? According to the Pshat, it's very, very hard to understand what is going on. Chassidus explained that this is all how it's to do with the spiritual worlds and all and everything. But generally speaking, what it says as tzayin, sheep, which is also, by the way, related to the carbon that we bring on Pesach. What kind of carbon do we bring on Pesach? It's a paschal sacrifice, sheep. Sheep represent bittul. They're very gentle. And not only that, sheep have the nature to be followers. They follow. That's why it's used in two directions. There's places where the Navi says, the Navi is reprimanding the Jewish people and say, why are you like sheep that you follow the ways of the other nations? But then the sheep in the positive way, that I follow Torah and I follow Hashem and I follow Hashem's leaders, Moshe Rabbeinu. So the reason why sheep are followers is because they have bittul. An ox is an animal that's aggressive, but sheep are their nature is bittul. Even their voice, the Gemara says, there's the sound that they make, they evoke compassion. And in general, they're soft, gentle animals. And when it says that Yaakov Avinu was busy with the sheep, it was about the Aveda of bittul. In fact, the word tzayin is spelled tzadik, aleph, nun. So the first two letters of the word tzayin is tzay, which means go out of yourself. The parsha that it's in is called Vayetze. Yaakov went out. It's all about going out of themselves. Well, the Rebbe brought out a beautiful point. It says that Yaakov had so much sheep that he went and he sold the sheep. And he got donkeys, and he got camels, other animals. The Rebbe explains this is the point behind it. The basis, the foundation was sheep. In other words, the donkey and the camels and the ox and all the other animals, they represent the aggressiveness, the part in a person which has to go out and be a mitzias and do things. But all that has to be based on bittul. So therefore, Begashmi is first he started off with sheep. Then the sheep was exchanged, and with the sheep he bought servants and maids and donkeys and camels and all the other animals, which means the sheep became the source for everything else that you had to do, which is more in the action part, the tool for action, which is the chametz, which is the positive chametz. So this explains, number one, why chametz is positive all year round, not only on different on Pesach. And number two, why the majority of the year is the chametz which is positive, and only on Pesach is the chametz which is negative. Any questions? By what? meaning
Because you have the foundation of the belief, then you have the years to be after. Whereas like in the older days, then this is a lot.
yeah, a lot of people wonder about that, but an interesting story you're bringing out is that there's a story with the Frierdiker Rebbe. It was Erev Pesach. It was the day before Pesach, Erev Pesach. And he was davening barichas, davening long like he usually did, meditating and so on and so forth. And the Rebbe Rashab said to him, Erev Pesach is not the time to daven long. Erev Pesach, you have to be davening fast. As you know, everything Pesach we do fast. Because it says in the Chumash, that they were supposed to sit by the Seder with their walking staff in their hand and their shoes on their feet and their belts were on and ready to go. We know when we bake the matzah, it has to be done fast because the Eibishter took it out of Mitzrayim fast. If it would have made it 1 second longer, we would have been stuck there. Pesach has to do with Zridus. So Pesach is a time that we're going through redemption, is not a time to daven long, it has to be fast. So some people offer some sort of explanation, like you're saying, that maybe our generation is Erev Pesach. It's the generation of redemption. And in our generation, more than any other generation, the main avodah is action. And therefore, it's not so much to dwell on the davening, and it still doesn't mean that we have to say the davening so fast that I don't remember if Ishto started. But still, the fact that there's no emphasis on davening for hours because we are more, actually, our generation is hands and feet. Years ago, people had heads and hearts. Our generation had hands and feet. And our avodah is more action. Yeah. Yep.
When we're in the Egyptian state with these out, I was confused. Are they chasing them like to death and in the back, or are they chasing them to just go, go?
Chase them to go. Because all they were having was plagues.
So then when we were at the sea,
That's when they changed their mind.
they were already chasing them and then we got.
No, the first, when it says in the Chumash that they chased them out of Egypt, that was chase them get away from there.
Okay.
And then Pharaoh changed his mind. And then they chased after to bring them back. And that was Hashem's plan to bring them to the Yam Suf and perform that miracle. And that they would be wiped out. Okay, to be continued. Hashem. You're welcome.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, I'm excited.
Brain. So in Israel, you used to do, but where did he bring it in Israel?
I know.
These are my
Yeah. He used to teach my women.
Right, but you're saying he bring for the women also, or what?
One teacher.
What?
Yeah, and he does, one time in Israel, I heard you were right, and I literally changed my entire trip because of his class, like I didn't even know I enjoyed learning something before class.
Okay.
It's
Okay, we couldn't get Chris, so we get.
No, we're getting Chris too.